Board of Education meeting for the School District of Milton. We will start, as we usually do, with a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Dahman, are you aware of any changes to our agenda?
There was one update in agenda item 4A, the discussion of possible action on children at risk support plan. There's no change in the order of the agenda, and that agenda item has been there, but we did find today in the edit that needed to take place to the document. So the document, we kept the old one in and added an updated memo. Agenda.
Which won't affect our agenda at all. So if someone wants to approve it, we can roll on.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Jennifer, seconded by Rick to approve our agenda. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. And action on the minutes comes next.
I move to approve the minutes for the regular meeting held on July 22nd, 2022. Excuse me, July 25th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Jennifer to approve the minutes from our previous meeting on July 25th. Questions on the minutes? All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. E is action on the vouchers.
I'll make a motion to approve general checking account vouchers totaling $1,505,769.92 as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from Mike, seconded by Rick, as you heard, to approve our vouchers in the amount he just enumerated. Are there any questions on the vouchers? And I hear none. All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. Public comment is next, and we have one person signed up, and we would welcome to the podium Tracy Hanna.
Okay, there we go.
I'm gonna make that stop and zoom. That would be really bad. Oh. Thank you, okay. Apologies for that, I didn't see the post-it note. Good evening, my name is Tracy Hanna, and I have a son moving into 8th grade this year. I'm here tonight to speak on the proposed strategic plan framework for the district. I would like to hear the board and the administration actively discuss this plan, as from a parent's perspective, it feels as though all of the personal aspects that make a school an engaging pillar of the community have been removed, and it now feels systematic, as though it was written by a computer program, attempting to tick boxes, but without feeling or caring for our students, teachers, staff, or the community. For example, in the prior plan, there was a community goal to engage stakeholders and nurture relationships through measures such as increased participation in parent, guardian, teacher conferences, increased community partnerships, and parent-guardian satisfaction surveys. But that has now been changed to a community goal of updating the district website and online resources with focus areas of utilizing purposeful two-way communication with all stakeholders and effective use of social media. These proposed goals are too focused on technology rather than face-to-face engagement. In my opinion, would be more limiting to the development of interpersonal relationships and would result in less community engagement, not more. The goal listed under high-quality staff reads a bit unforgiving and unfair for our teachers. All certified staff will learn and implement effective instructional and assessment strategies to meet the graduate profile. What if they don't? Will they all be terminated? Obviously no. But the way things are written and the way things read matter. Wouldn't it be better stated that all certified staff will work together with the administration and be supported through learning to implement effective instructional and assessment strategies with the goal of meeting the profile? Just a changing of a few words changed the tone. It is also discouraging to see that all specific references to parents or guardians have been removed. I am making the assumption that parents and guardians are being lumped into the word stakeholder. But as an engaged parent, it is disappointing to be lumped into a category but those that may not be as invested in the success of my student or our schools. I hope that as a board, you can discuss this and understand how it looks from the outside. It needs more heart, measurable goals, more parent engagement, and more milling, if this is to be a tool for the future. As it now reads, it's nothing more than a template that can be purchased on Google. I ask you to bring more to this plan than what has been presented. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, as that was the only one signed up, we will move on. And next on the agenda is the superintendent update from Rich, Red Hawk highlights.
So a few things to highlight tonight. We are gearing up now that it's August for getting students and staff back to school. Our annual student registration has begun, and it continues through August 14th. Schedules and classroom teacher information will be available in Skyward Family Access on August 12th. And bus routes will be available in Skyward the week of August 22nd. On our district's Facebook page, we created a back to school guide that is kind of a one-stop shop for all of that information. Parents can find quick links to all the basics from school start times to school meal information at that location on the website. And if anyone has any questions or is running into any issues with the registration process, they can contact our Family Enrollment Center at 868-9209. We also have a number of open houses and meet and greets set up for later in the month of August. I won't go through all the dates and times for those. Those are available on our website, but open houses at each of our schools are taking place on August 30th or 31st. In preparation for that first day of school on September 1st. There's also open house at Go Right Way, Meet Your Bus Driver, on both August 30th or 31st coming up. Some of our athletic teams and activities have started already and have some events coming up between now and the next school board meeting. I'll highlight some of those. Our JV and varsity football teams have their first games at home on Thursday the 18th and Friday the 19th against Fort Atkinson. And also on Friday, August 19th, our girls golf has their first meet in Beaver Dam. The other fall athletic teams are having their first competitions after the next board meeting, so I'll give an update on those events at the next board meeting. And then something else that I want to highlight is the Wall of Honor nominations that have just opened up. So we're actively seeking nominations for the inaugural class to be inducted into the Wall of Honor at Milton High School. The hallway between the event entrance and the field house, there's a spot where we will put plaques for the Wall of Honor. And the Wall of Honor will celebrate and honor students, alumni, staff, and community members who distinguish themselves throughout their lives and have made a positive impact on their community. And we currently have a athletics hall of fame that is specific to former athletes, coaches. The Wall of Honor could include people who received some type of recognition through athletics, but it's designed to be much more open than that. Anyone who's graduates or former students, staff, again, community members that have distinguished themselves throughout their lives and provided a positive impact on the community. The nomination process for that is open now. There's nominations available through a link on our website. If people would like to pick up a hard copy of a nomination form, they'll be available at Milton High School starting that first day of school on September 1st. And nominations are open until September 17th to be considered for that inaugural class. We will have a reception on October 13th at Milton High School to recognize that first class of inductees. And they also will be recognized at halftime of the varsity football game on October 14th. And then we will begin nominations shortly after that for next year's nominating class, and we'll be tying in the future, the inductees to homecoming weekend, because we had an early homecoming this year and we wanted to have enough time to gather nominees. The induction isn't gonna take place during homecoming weekend, but in future years it will. And we'll be looking for people who are interested in being involved in the selection committee for the 2023 class. They can reach out to Wall of Honor at milton.k12.wi.us. So we're excited about that. It'll be a great way for us to honor people who have reached a high level of achievement across the district.
Very good. Any questions for Rich? All right, we will roll past that. 3 is our strategic planning update. A is discussion and possible action on the updated strategic plan framework. And I'm going to assume, Rich, that you're going to pilot that discussion.
I'll be involved in the discussion, but Jennifer will kind of kick things off. In board docs, there's 3 different documents. There's a memo, there's the strategic plan framework, the current one that's been in place since 2018, and then there's a draft of an updated strategic plan framework that are all included there. So Jennifer, will turn things over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. So again, over the past year or so, right, the board and certainly the strategic planning committee, along with the administrative team, we've taken steps to develop and implement a system to determine our district-wide goals. And we have, again, a draft document for your review. And again, the district-wide goals are tied to our strategic goals, and coming up with both the focus areas and the goals, we did engage staff, parents, and community members. And then the following steps really have been taken. So there has been major themes and strategic issues for each of the pillars. Holly, if you want to bring up that document, maybe just the draft for the upcoming. So there are pillars attached to those pillars. Obviously, again, our focus areas and goals. We also, at our last board meeting, adopted the graduate profile, and the portrait of the Red Hawk, again, which identifies key characteristics expected of each of our graduates. We examined student achievement and survey data, again, the last time we met, also demographics, and then moving forward tonight, obviously, we will hopefully be able to have discussion about these focus areas and goals and adopt, again, 4 out of the 5 pillars, the operations and facilities. We do want to hold off on those focus areas and goals until September. So, if you want to, do you want me to go through each of the areas? Do you want to do that?
I will.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple things that we compare the current from 2018 until now to the draft of the new. There's a couple of different changes there. The one that I want to highlight, and we spoke a little bit to this at a previous board meeting, that 5th strategic objective or pillar in the previous or the 2018 model was titled facilities and services, and part of the draft is to rename that operations and facilities to have more of a focus beyond just the facilities, but to our overall, I think what gets in that category are non-academic things, whether it would include facilities, but also transportation, building and grounds, HR, food services are all different departments or parts of our operations that will fall under that category. Jennifer shared that we're not looking for action on a goal or focus areas in that pillar tonight because we are going to be looking at some data from that pillar at our annual meeting 2 weeks from tonight, And then the timeline would be to bring in September the draft of potential goal and focus areas based on that data that we look at from our annual meeting and in early September. So we really are looking at our other 4 pillars, and the focus areas and the goals are new from where we were in the past. The old model did have very specific goals that had more broad, higher level areas. And those focus areas really came from the themes that came out of the previous discussion that we've had and the feedback sessions that we've had with staff. We want to be able to utilize these district-wide goals when we work with our school leadership teams. They're meeting next week to set their scorecard goals. So the hope is that the board will approve a framework tonight, and then we can use that when we work with those teams. We can then roll that out with staff when they come back at the end of August, and roll it out to parents in September, and then build in the parts for the operations and facilities. And then once it's all finalized, detail what those measures will be in each of the areas based on the goals that are chosen by the board, and then move forward with some communication with both this document, this framework, and tied together with our new graduate profile that we'd be sharing out with staff and with families around that same time frame. So I don't know if there's any other preview that I have other than just opening things up to the board for discussions, for questions, for comments. And maybe just a reminder that there was, based on previous discussions, there was previous discussions with the board and strategic planning sessions. There was a desire to have the board goals and our district-wide goals potentially be multi-year goals if needed, and we can revisit those at any time that we want to. But then also have those goals at a higher level, and then each school and department would be able to dig in more specifically on how they're going to do their part to help bring across these district-wide goals.
Okay, floor is open for anyone to opine on the strategic plan in the form that it sits.
Rich, have the admins had a chance to look at this draft copy?
No.
Is there any feedback to share on
I
their
think a
part?
lot of the feedback from the admin team is built into what we have, what we brought here. We've had a number of discussions over the past few weeks, and even going back further than that. So this incorporates feedback from staff members from back in the spring. We had multiple sessions with staff members for them to provide any feedback around the strategic plan. And then our admin team has worked on this since that time.
But is it the kind of the goal to share out that graduate profile, and then this, if adopted, say like before school starts with families?
I think that, I guess the short answer to that is yes. We want to get this information out to staff first, and we would do that on that first day when all staff are back on August 22nd. And then between then and the start of the school year, we would communicate it out to the families with the disclaimer that it's going to continue to be edited once we add the operations and facilities portion to that. But for both this document and the grad profile, we want to get that information out first to staff and then out to families prior to the start of the school year.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I know I missed that discussion, but I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for all the time and effort put into all this, and thanks for providing all of that data at the last meeting. I know that Very helpful. And I like this document, and I think it talks a lot about what we do well, but things that we can also continue to improve on, which is what we always need to be looking towards. I think it's also important to remember that just because something isn't specifically stated on here, doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to work on it, or that it's not an important part of what we do. So I just think it's important to remember that. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for all their time in this. I'll make a motion to approve the strategic plan framework to include the updates as discussed.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Rick, seconded by Jennifer, to approve our strategic plan as we see it. Is there any other discussion on that?
Yeah, I want to just bring up some of the things
Sure.
that were
Go ahead,
talked about in the public comments. Just in general, you said this will go back to the building site or leadership teams. So will they add in their? So I guess I'm asking, will their input and how they're going to do it in each building be on their website for their building, so parents know this isn't the whole thing? It'll be individualized by elementaries, by Northside, by middle school to fit the needs of that building. Will that document be somewhere for them to either give input or have access to?
Yeah, I don't think that in the past we have, and I don't know if you folks on the admin team have a better answer to this. Maybe Ryan Rose might know. Our scorecard work, I don't think that we posted that on the website in the past, the individual goals, but I do think that I would see some value in doing that. So, do you know in the past have we posted scorecard goals on the website?
No, actually, I'm not posted on the website. That's been tools that we use internally and then use with the district leadership team.
We have shared our building goals through newsletters where the families are made aware of the goals and the activities that are focus areas that we'll be working on through the year.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of something like that. I think would be really beneficial, so that it's more transparency for the, what's going on in first grade and what's going on in fourth grade and how is it tying in with our goals. I think it's going to be a lot of stuff coming at parents between knowing what's this, which is what's the report card, what's the graduate profile, because they all kind of look similar and sound similar. And I know we've always talked about having SMART goals, so I want to make sure that these are all measurable and have some meat to them also. But yeah, I think that would be helpful, like having what the building goals are. Yeah, they don't necessarily need to. They'll know the report card when they see the scores come up, but knowing what's going on in their building and how it fits into the overall district plan.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We want to make sure that each school has the ability to dig into their school's data and set goals specific to their schools. But I also want to reinforce that one of the reasons that we specifically listed the focus areas here were so that when we work with our staff and when we inform and communicate with parents, that there isn't the idea that the individual goal in each pillar is the only thing that we're working on. The focus areas are also things that we'll be working on, but we also didn't want to have the district set 2 or 3 or 4 goals in each of the 5 pillars, because then we get spread pretty thin if we have too many goals in each of those areas. So we wanted this first time through to limit it to 1 main goal in each area, but the different focus areas are called focus areas because there are things that we're going to continue to work on. And one thing that was mentioned under that community engagement is building those strong relationships with parents, and we think that's one of the most important things that we do. So we work hard on that, and we will continue to work hard in that area.
And I think this allows each building to have their own individuality too. They're following the district's goals, but as we know, each building has its own climate and its own positives with it, and with their students and their families and connections. So I'm hoping that shows through the building goals and things like that, that combine with this.
Piggybacking off a little bit of what Shelley just said, I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to, one of the things I think I'm missing from this is how we're gonna measure these goals. It seems like the last one we had our measures, and we eliminated that here, and we have these focus areas, which kind of goes a little bit more into depth on the goals, but how are we going to know if some of these goals have been obtained, and how are we going to measure that as we're going along?
And I didn't highlight that when we went through the memo, but one of the things that we talked about in the second to the last paragraph of the memo is that those district and school-wide goals will be measured annually, and the specific systems of measure for each pillar will be designated in the strategic plan document once the goals are established. So once the board approves the goals, we will add that section of measures dependent on what the goals and focus areas are. So some of those are the same things that were in place with the previous plan, but a number of those have changed over the course of the last 6 years. So I agree that it's important for us to be specific about what those measurements will be, and we can bring back that edited when we work on the operations and facilities pillar. We can have the measures for the other areas put together by then.
And if there's a problem where they can't be measured, would we revisit the goals then? Because how do you put the goals before you know how you're gonna measure them? Like, why would you make the goal if you can't measure it?
Yeah, we have ideas in place for all of the different goals here and how they'll be measured, but we didn't want to specify to a very high degree until we knew what the goals were going to be. But the board has the ability to come back and edit this at any time that they want to or see the need to.
Or that it's presented back to the strategic planning committee, which is where it should be.
So tonight we're just looking to approve the draft. Is that correct?
Yes, because it's still going to be updated. But once this is approved, it's still a working document. But this would give us the ability to begin the work with our building teams and to start preparing what we're going to show out with families.
So this is really the framework in which, again, they should start to work off of.
Thank you.
I wondered, to sort of echo one of the public comments that Ms. Hannah made there, the goal under high quality staff there about all certified staff will learn and implement. It does land a little harsh, I guess, when I read it. I wondered if there's a way that we can soften that just a tick. And I do like, she even kind of gave us a suggestion, I guess, of sorts that says maybe, all certified staff will be supported to learn and implement effective instructional and assessment strategies, et cetera, et cetera. I think I agree to a point that it's a nuance, but it does soften it a little bit such that it's a little more user-friendly for the folks that we're going to depend on to do it. I don't know what other folks think about that.
Right. I like the idea of will be trained and supported implementation of.
Some wording that, it's still the overarching goal, but we're going to support them as they implement it, something to that effect.
So if we just, at the start of that, if we said all certified staff will be supported in learning and implementing effective instructional.
I mean, to me, that softens it a fair amount and still looks like it's a partnership. We're going to support them and they're going to implement the goal. And I don't know, that's just.
So I see this as providing direction, not just for our staff, but just as much direction for our supervisors and administrators, that it's directing us to put together a plan on how we will plan what those instructional needs are based on data, and then put together a plan and implement it and provide support. So to me, it sounds like a good fit the way that it had been shared to make that update.
Anybody else's thoughts?
Did you get that written down, Carly?
I think so. So what was the final what's the wording that you guys would like the most?
And, I was kind of ad-libbing there a little bit, but all certified staff will be supported as they learn and implement effective, and then you can continue the verbiage the same as it is in the draft there. Is that amenable to everybody? It's kind of a, okay. Any other discussion? I see none, and we have a motion and second on the floor to adopt our strategic plan framework here as we see it. Does anyone want that restated, or are we good with what we're doing?
And I want to make sure that there's clarity on this. The way that the possible motion was listed was so that it would include any updates that the board discusses, like the one that we just discussed. So
Right.
if the motion that was made included the end to include the updates as discussed, then the motion on the table covers that change.
Was that your
we talked about.
intention? Yeah. That's the intention, so just so we're clear. Then all in favor of approval of that signify with an aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. We have a framework. Thank you everyone for that. So we will move down to new business. A is discussion and possible action on the Children at Risk Support Plan for 2022-23. And I will take this opportunity to welcome Julia Garcinski.
Thank you.
And we have not had a chance to interact with you yet, but please accept our warm welcome and go ahead.
All right, so you can refer to the memo out there, tiny little print, so I'm going to kind of go through this. But each year prior to August 15th, we have a mandatory report that we have to give the board that describes how the district will address the needs of the students who are identified as being at risk of not graduating on time. So we use the word at risk differently, but in purposes of this report, it's for at risk of not graduating with their graduating class. So according to DPI, there's some bullet points there on your memo. Children at risk are identified as students in grades 5 through 12 who are dropouts, or students who are found in two of the following categories. So those are the bullet points there. Students who are more than 1 year behind in credits, students who are 2 or more years behind in the basic skills, habitual truants, teen parents, adjudicated delinquents, and then in 8th grade, there's some multiple indicators, which include being below basic on the Wisconsin Forward exam, failing the 8th grade examination, or students who have failed to have been promoted to 9th grade. So those are kind of what we look at, or how we collect the data. Those are our indicators. So we collect the data by using our grade level benchmarks. For K-8, that's our iReady screener, which you are aware of. We can easily see who are the students who are 1 or 2 levels below where they should be. We don't have a general academic screener at the high school, so this year and in the past, we've used the ACT Aspire. It's a different assessment. It looks at students who are on track for college, so it's not really apples to apples with that general academic screener, but we need a measure, and that's what we have. Truancy is identified as, in state statute, is students who are unexcused for 10 days out of the school year. And that's not a full day, it can be a half day, it can be a period of a day. So once you get to that threshold of 10, you are considered habitually truant. And then that multiple factor information, students identified in 2 categories. We really looked at the 9th through 11th grade numbers. They're higher, they typically always are higher, and it's just, we find that those indicators are just not accurate because of the measure that we use. So leadership really digs down into that information, have intentional conversations, look at individual students, but we also use other measures that are not identified on that list, just to really try to give us a more accurate picture of really who is at risk of not graduating. Some things to note, just that this report is one indicator that we use. Different principals use it differently. I had individual conversations with all the building leadership just so I could get a better understanding of what we were looking at and how we were moving forward.
but they all are using the information with the ultimate goal of reducing the amount of students on that report. We look at patterns, different accurate measures. We had a lot of conversation around the data that we have at our fingertips. So it was all very interesting, but the ultimate goal is to empower engaged students so that they want to learn deeper. So if we go to the second page of the memo, it's basically the meat of this. So what are we going to do to address this data? I wrote on there that it's not an exhaustive list, so it's just some of the things that we're being intentional about and that are on our radar. So I'm just going to go through some of these. K6, working on a deeper dive into that responsive classroom. You've heard about that model. More people are getting trained. We're continuing to build a connection, positive relationships with students. This again gets at that engagement piece. If we have students engaged, they'll want to be coming to school. They'll want to be involved in their learning. That's the whole idea on increasing that achievement. This year, we're implementing the new ELA curriculum, K-8. So all students there have access to the rigorous, intentional, universal instruction. We've been very mindful not to pull any students from that universal instruction. So any of our interventions or extensions or for special ed, any of the specially designed instruction is done and received outside of that universal sense. So all students will have access to that. At Northside, continuing to strengthen their multi-level systems of support during that extension, and then they have the intervention and extension period, so that 0 hour. They work on mentoring, math intervention, explicitly teaching and supporting social emotional skills. And then we move to the middle and the high school. Middle school has trained more staff in AVID, helping increase that student engagement piece. They're also going to be using restorative practices to help kind of address that social emotional need, feeling of inclusion, connectedness, and hopefully increasing their ability to kind of cope with those academic stressors, and ultimately that's going to impact how they show up and how they're ready to access their learning. At the high school, so I kind of talked about those measures or indicators that we just have at our fingertips that we'd like to see some more accuracy with. They're going to be introducing Chalk Talk, so that will hopefully be a better indicator for academic performance. Also providing alternate educational options for students to better meet their needs, which we really had to take a look at over COVID. And then district level, we're going to be having a focus again on that alternate educational programming, evaluating the program, seeing what else we could potentially provide, and we'll come back with potential recommendations on future planning, but that would also look at virtual planning as well. So lots of information. Any questions for me about just some of those, like outlined in the report?
I'll go first.
Over.
Not so much in the report, just a couple questions on the number of at-risk students. When do we determine that? Does that ever change throughout the year? What's our trend? Do we have more or less? Kind of what you have those numbers?
Yeah, so I don't have them handy, but we do have comparative data that has been compiled for years that I have access to. And the trend since the last few years has been increasing, but we do feel like it's because our measures and some of those things are not accurate. When we kind of looked back at last year's number, just so I could get an understanding, the number that 11th graders had on the report was like 30 to 40% of students were at risk of not graduating. But truly, when we looked back at the class, it was less than 5%. But we used the measures that we had in place, which again was ACT Aspire, and then those other bullet points that were outlined. And so they're automatically flagged based on that criteria. So hopefully with more accurate indicators, we would have less kids, because truly that's not what we see as an outcome. But yes, lots of information that we have at our fingertips that I can definitely share with you. Trending upwards, obviously, from pre-COVID.
One other thing that I want to share, that the that, or the steps involved on the second and third pages of the memo are really tied closely to what we refer to as a multi-tiered system of support. So when we looked at, if you remember when we looked at the iReady data at the last board meeting, they had the triangle charts that showed students who are achieving that grade level from their universal instruction, and you want that to be as high into the triangle as you can, as large a percent as possible who are meeting those grade level standards through their universal instruction. And that's tier one. That's something that every student gets. And then as Julia shared, in addition to that universal instruction, some students need more support, and some of those things are highlighted in the bullet points there. One good example of that in the middle school is their eye time. So during eye time, all students get that 30 minutes in their schedule that is used for a content area where they need additional support. So it might be some small group work that's enough to bring another certain percent of students up to that grade level standard. And then there are always some students who need more intensive, it might be one-on-one support to reach those grade level standards. So that's the third tier. And a big part of what we do is on a regular basis identify where students are in their learning. And we don't know right now where students will be in January. Some students will make progress, some faster, some students will make progress more slowly. So our teachers are constantly looking at different ways you can measure students' progress and where students are and what support they need. And so that the number of students that are at risk of not graduating changes on a regular basis. And we kind of use the categories that are listed here because they're in statute. So we kind of use those as an initial screener. But as Julia shared, we have better diagnostic tools, and our teachers and doing the work with the students every day have a better idea of where that student is at any point in time than how they did on a test that they took last spring that they may or may not have given their top effort on too. So we're constantly, a big part of what our PLCs do is identify our students meeting the standards or not, which students are, which aren't, and what kind of support do we need to provide for those students who aren't at the level that we want them to be.
Julie, just real quick, if you can highlight perhaps a few of the differences of the 2022-23 plan versus obviously what the plan looked like last year, or provide the board perhaps just electronically with the 21-22 plan. I guess I'm just curious to know what steps are we taking that are new and different, and I guess also what is the difference? Like what John said, what is the difference between what were our numbers in 21-22, and because it sounds to me like you give a report with the numbers and then you give the plan to DEI.
Yeah,
so there's a
two-piece
two-piece kind of segue. So if we could just know what are some of the highlighted differences.
Sure, yeah. And a lot of the building leadership had put some of those recommendations in. I know for K through third that the ELA curriculum obviously is going to be a big one, and or even through eighth. So that was one of the additional power or the additional bullet points. But a lot of those other intentional conversations are ongoing, and it's always something that beyond just this report that we're doing. So it is important to kind of leave those in there and look at those. I don't think anybody from your plan is here, but high school, did you want to talk, Mr. Wilhorn? I was kind of alluding to that. So I feel like high school really, we don't have an accurate measure or a really good pulse on what the number of students who actually are at risk of not graduating. We don't really have an accurate measure of that. So we had some extensive conversation there. If you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest, I guess, in the last 2 years, some of the big changes in the last 2 years. One is just the number of alternative options that we have for students. That, as Rich mentioned, a lot of this is individual. Like, what is the story for each one of these kids? And Terry Huber really has led that up for the last 2 years, where much of it has to do some online education, a lot of it in the Milton Wire program, where some students might be taking 1 or 2 classes online, but they're here at the high school getting support with Matt Smith, working through other skills, or they might be taking a couple classes face-to-face. Really, we could have 65 kids in there, and there's 65 different types of programs that are individualized to that student. A lot of our very, very high graduation rate. So while the numbers have increased by the metrics would say that these kids are at risk, remember, we still have very, very high graduation rates by the time they get to the end of their senior year. And a lot of that has to do with that type of program. We've really looked at that the last 2 years. We've learned a lot through COVID. The other metric that we're starting to use too, we're always searching for what are high school students reading and math skills beyond just what their classroom grades are. What's a metric that you can use with that? We're using ACT Aspire. As you mentioned, that it measures something different, but the reality is, with Chalk Talk, that gives us some more diagnostic data that we can individualize responses. We've shared about Chalk Talk before, and what those responses can be both at the classroom level and also individual students. Those are just 2 examples of things really over the last 2 years and changes that have been added to this plan that Susan presented in Outdoors.
Will you be training teachers on Chalk Talk, especially since you have a lot of new teachers coming into the district?
Yes, we do. That's part of the August training.
Okay. 'Cause I don't know, I think some of them felt like it was kind of put fast quickly last year.
We had it,
Because we just got it.
pilot this
Right.
last spring, but everyone is being trained. That's something that's ongoing with the staff too, as we get new staff.
Jeremy, because Chalk Talk will be moving from a pilot program to a school-wide program, and because StudyFlex was new last year, can you give a short overview to the board on both of those 2 things to make sure that everyone has a clear idea of what's in place?
Absolutely. So Chalk Talk simply is it's aligned towards ACT standards. So it's an effort to actually learn what are the specific skills that are tested in ACT, particularly math and reading. What are the specific skills and where are students at? So we're trying to, beyond just our classroom assessments, what are the specific skill levels of individual students? So the student takes an assessment in the fall, we'll have, again, I call it diagnostic data. Where does, Johnny has levels here and Susie has levels here. We're going to be able to, there's 2 things. One, we can get general trends within that class that we can give to PLCs, so the English department can take a look and say, these are the 3 or 4 skills we're really going to need to focus on this next trimester, or we're going to focus on this next year. That's what that data is giving us. But it also gives students individual reports, and again, from the student who's trying to raise their score up to a 20, or a student who's trying to get from a 31 to a 33, right? So it gives it individualized data, and we can actually use that and it gives them study sessions that they can work with individually as well. So it gives us lessons that we can actually set up individual lessons for groups of students that we can put into a StudyFlex. We can pull students, we might say these 20 students need help on this skill. But we're going to assign them to the StudyFlex period 1 day a week for 5 weeks so we can work on that specific skill. So it's really the individual, the group, and then the universal. We have data that we can use for all of this.
I just have one other quick question.
Yeah.
So probably more for Julia. Is there any consequences? What does DPS do with this information? And again, does the district have consequences if in fact these numbers in this plan, I mean, what do they do with
Don't
it?
work, right? I don't know the answer to that. I can.
It's a requirement, right?
It's a requirement.
It's in state statute, and I think the intent is to make sure that districts are alert to students that are struggling and have plans in place on how they address students that are struggling. I don't think there's any district in the state that only pays attention to students in the criteria that's laid out in the statute and then stops there. I think a lot of districts do what we do is we have a very comprehensive system for measuring student progress. We revisit it continuously throughout the year and then look for ways to provide that support for students throughout the year.
But no consequences.
No, there are no consequences for students or for districts built into. I guess the consequence for a student who doesn't achieve their credit is that
Yeah,
they wouldn't,
there is-
that they wouldn't graduate. But
Is
there
this
aren't-
part of our report card, like with the gap?
it's not directly built into the report card, but you hit the nail on the head that if you're making progress with some students and you have other students that aren't making progress, then that gap grows and then that shows up on your district report card score. So the idea is that you continue to make progress with the students who are at or above standard, that they're continuing to be challenged and grow, but students that need more support are growing at a faster rate so that that gap closes.
Anybody else with questions for Julia? Otherwise, this is an action item so that we can get that report filed timely.
I move to approve the children at risk support plan presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Jennifer, to approve the Children at Risk Support Plan as we just heard. Are there any questions on it? All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you, Ms. Julia. Alrighty, B on new business is action on 2022-23 open enrollment alternative applications, which I'm sure are included in board docs.
I'll make a motion to approve the 22-23 open enrollment alternative applications as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from John, seconded by Mike, to approve the open enrollment alternative apps. Are there any questions on those? All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you, that clearly passes. Miscellaneous comes up next. A is staffing report.
I'll make a motion to approve the staffing report as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Jennifer, to approve the staffing report as we have it. Questions on it? All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That clearly passes also. B is gifts and donations.
I'll make a motion to approve the gifts and donations with gratitude.
I'll second that.
Motion from Jennifer, seconded by John, to approve our gifts and donations. Just one of those on here this month for $200. And with our gratitude as usual. Questions? All in favor of approval signify with aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. The gifts are approved. And meeting dates, Mr. Dahman?
Two things that are coming up in 2 weeks. We have our next regularly scheduled board meeting 2 weeks from tonight. And that will be on August 22nd. And then we also have our annual meeting the same night on August 22nd. Both of those meetings will be here at the PDC. We had looked at, in the past years, we had used Northside at times, we had used the high school at times. In discussion with Joe, we decided to keep our annual meeting here and the same for our regular meeting. We don't have any committee meetings scheduled right now, and it's a little bit down the road, but between the two September board meetings, so probably sometime in the week between September 12th and or the week of September 19th, we'd like to have both a policy committee meeting and a HR committee meeting. In discussion with Rick, prior to this meeting, Rick, you had shared that your work schedule is changing and you're not certain at this point what that will look like for those weeks. So people on both the policy and the HR committee meeting, you can be looking at your calendars, but once we hear from Rick on what his work schedule looks like, we'll get out some possible times, or maybe even if we know by the next, in 2 weeks from now when we meet, we can schedule, we've got time to schedule it then too. But just a couple things to have on your radar.
All right, very good. And then we are scheduled to do a little executive session here, which I will entertain a motion for in a moment. And we are not planning to come back to open session. We do not have any action coming out of this, so just FYI for the rest of the folks here. So I will entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to state statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub C which is considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. And we will be visiting with Rich on kind of a year-to-date goals update for some of the goals we had that we sat down with Rich and did at his annual review.
I will make said motion.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Mike for what I